This is video number 3 in chapter 13 in our wireless security class. Let's look at some protocol exploits. So protocols, of course, are that stuff that goes on in the background that moves data from one place to another. And here are a few exploits. One thing we can do on our wireless network is to impersonate a radius server. Now, if you remember what a radius server does, well, it can do a couple of things. It can set up VPNs, but it also can authenticate users on a corporate network. This would be that WPA2 enterprise, for example. So if we impersonate that radius server, then the person thinks that they are logging onto the server, but they're actually giving you the credentials, the bad guy, I should say, the credentials, instead of a true radius server. Now, by the way, this works when the radius setup is using PEEP. It does not work with the later and stronger EAP TLS authentication type, but PEEP is still fairly common out there. If you remember back a few weeks, we talked about LEAP and PEEP and then EAP TLS. LEAP being the weakest, PEEP being next, but then EAP TLS being the latest. This does rely on certificate acceptance by clients, and the thing is, on a lot of phones, they will accept almost anything as a certificate. Speaking of certificates, there are some certificate exploits that we can do. For example, many mobile applications don't even properly check or validate certificates. SSL was very slow to update certificates. Now, SSL was the predecessor to TLS. We still use it, but we don't use it as often as we do because of some vulnerabilities, and this is one of those vulnerabilities. It would sometimes take months before it would go out and update certificates from a certificate authority. TLS did improve on that, and it updates them a lot faster. The heartbeat vulnerability was a type of a certificate attack. And if you want to look up the heartbeat vulnerability, you can learn a lot about it. I'm not going to go into it here because I don't want to take a lot of your time this week. Developer signed certificates. So a lot of developers create their own certificates. They don't go out to a certificate authority because that costs money, and so they create their own signed certificates. Well, the problem with that is those certificates are not as well controlled as when they come from a certificate authority, and so if they get stolen, lost, or something, then they can be altered and no longer work as a certificate. Phishing exploits. A smaller screen makes it much harder to spot the signs of a phishing email. And so a lot of people will click on something on the phone that they would take the time to look at if it was on a larger screen. Captive portals. We've talked about captive portals before. If you're on a public Wi-Fi system, for example, McDonald's or something, you go ahead and log on. It doesn't require any password to log on, but then a screen pops up and it asks you for some information, or it could even ask for password information in some cases, depending on the captive portal. Now, that captive portal is not a function of the security of the router. It is a function of the web server that is on that network. But a captive portal collects information about users that are getting on a public network. And so if you impersonate the captive portal and send a message across that public network, people will just give you their credentials. Drive-by browser exploits are a little broader than is mentioned in the chapter, and I should have indented this, so let me go back and do that. A drive-by exploit is actually just simply downloading malicious software to a user without their knowledge. But in this specific instance in our book, it's talking about using insecure browser add-ons to allow this malicious software to be downloaded to the browser. So those are a few of the infrastructure or protocol exploits, if you will. All right, that's the end of this one. In the next one, I will talk about mobile software exploits and remediation. This is the developer side, and we'll do that next time.